The Parker house sat quietly on Maple Street, its white siding bathed in the soft golden light of an early September morning. Inside, the hum of the refrigerator mingled with the gentle squeaks of Liam's crib, creating a rhythm only a home filled with new life could possess. But there was another heartbeat in the house that had long become just as important: Ranger, a massive German shepherd with eyes that seemed to see everything, especially Liam. He had been a guardian before Liam's first cry, a sentinel of instinct and loyalty. But now, as the infant slept lightly in his crib, Ranger's presence felt almost sacred. From the moment Liam had come home from the hospital, Ranger had been inseparable from him. He would lie at the foot of the crib, ears alert, nostrils flaring with every change in the baby's tiny breathing. Sometimes he would nudge the swaddled infant with his wet nose, as though reminding the parents to slow down, to breathe, to notice the miracle before them. The neighbors often joked that Ranger was the real parent. He watched with an intensity that was both protective and deeply tender, a silent witness to Liam's earliest coups and stumbles. But the morning had an unusual tension. Instead of the familiar playful nudges or the soft pawing at doors, Ranger sat rigidly by the kitchen doorway, staring at the sliding glass doors that led to the backyard. His tail twitched intermittently, a low whine escaping him now and then. Amanda Parker, Liam's mother, watched him from the counter, a cup of coffee forgotten in her trembling hands. She knew that look. She had seen it twice before, the day the doctor had delivered news that had made her knees buckle, only worse. Dr. Reynolds, Liam's pediatrician, had come that morning with a seriousness in his eyes that even Amanda and her husband, Mark, had never seen. "I'm afraid his condition has deteriorated faster than we anticipated," he said softly, choosing words carefully, as though each one could shatter their world. Amanda had clutched Mark's hand instinctively, a small act of human solidarity in a moment that felt increasingly unreal. Machines that had once monitored Liam's vitals at home now beeped in relentless, urgent tones at the hospital, a chorus of warnings that no parent wants to hear. "He's stable for now," the doctor continued, "but the truth is we're running out of options. There's something you should consider." Amanda had turned pale, fear tightening her chest. Mark swallowed audibly. The nurse gestured, hesitant, as if unsure she should speak at all. "There's a way you could see him peacefully. He's conscious enough to respond, if you want him to have a last moment with those who love him most." Amanda's breath hitched. Mark's hand squeezed hers so hard it left a mark. The words hung in the room, heavy and unforgiving. Final moments. Outside, Ranger seemed to sense the gravity of the situation. He sat rigid, ears pricked forward, gaze fixed unwaveringly on the glass doors as if he could see beyond walls, beyond time, beyond human comprehension. His head tilted slightly when Amanda whispered, "We have to go now. Liam needs us." In the car on the way to the hospital, Ranger sat in the backseat, his eyes darting between the window and the baby carrier, his ears catching every distant sound: the horn of a truck, the whisper of wind, the faint sob of a stranger passing. He let out a low, almost mournful whine, resting his head briefly against the baby's carrier, as though sensing the urgency of what was about to happen. When they arrived at the pediatric wing, the hospital's fluorescent lights cast a cold, sterile glare on the linoleum floor. Ranger stepped onto the linoleum cautiously, paws clicking softly, ears flicking at every noise, the distant clatter of carts, the soft murmur of nurses, the sterile squeak of rubber gloves. The Parker family's hearts raced. Liam's room was at the end of a long, quiet corridor. The nurse pushed open the door with a hand that trembled slightly, as though the very act of opening it felt like entering hallowed ground. Ranger paused at the threshold. The soft beeping of monitors filled the room, punctuating the tension like the ticking of a clock counting down to an inevitable, unimaginable moment. Liam lay on the hospital bed, swaddled in a tiny blanket, fragile and pale. His small hands twitched involuntarily, a subtle reminder of the life still within him. His chest rose and fell with shallow breaths, each one a victory in its own fragile way. Amanda and Mark approached, tears welling, voices choked. "Hi, baby, it's Mommy and Daddy," Amanda whispered, brushing her hair from her face. Mark knelt beside her, his hand hovering near Liam's tiny fingers, but they didn't dare touch him yet. There was a quiet reverence in the room, a shared understanding that this moment was not just about saying goodbye. It was about love, protection, and memory. Then, as if responding to an unspoken signal, Ranger stepped forward. He did not bolt, did not leap onto the bed as he would have at home. Instead, he moved slowly, deliberately, each paw measured, his head lowered in respect. The nurses and even the doctor instinctively held their breath. Ranger's eyes locked on the baby, and it was clear to everyone in the room that he understood. He reached the bedside and gently rested his front paws on the edge of the hospital bed, lowering his head until his wet nose brushed Liam's cheek. Liam's tiny eyelids fluttered, his chest rising and falling a little more steadily, as if recognizing the familiar presence of his lifelong protector. Ranger stayed like that for a long, sacred moment, silent and still, radiating warmth that the machines and walls could not measure. Amanda whispered through her tears, "He's here, he knows." Mark nodded, unable to speak, his throat too tight to form words. Ranger's ears twitched, his tail still, his body tense yet gentle, and then something almost imperceptible happened. The monitors flickered slightly, a rhythm change that none of the adults could explain. Ranger's head shifted slightly, nudging Liam's tiny hand toward his own chest. The movement was deliberate, almost ritualistic, and for a moment, everyone in the room was suspended in disbelief. The doctor cleared his throat, whispering, I've never seen anything like this." Nurses exchanged glances, unsure whether to intervene or merely witness. Ranger did not react to anyone. He was focused, unwavering, and it was clear he had one purpose: to be with Liam until the very last breath. Then Ranger paused. He lifted his head, eyes darting between the parents and the baby as though seeking permission, or perhaps delivering a silent promise. Amanda and Mark leaned in, hearts hammering. Ranger pressed his head gently back onto Liam's chest. He stayed there, unmoving, a guardian of life and witness to its fragile edge. The room fell into a profound, almost holy silence. The hum of the hospital, the faint beeping of machines, the distant voices, all faded into the background. Only Ranger, Liam, and the weight of impending finality remained. And as Ranger lowered his massive head, resting it fully against Liam's small body, the nurse at the doorway whispered to herself, trembling, he knows what's coming." At that moment, every person in the room felt the air shift, not with fear, not with despair, but with a chilling, heart-wrenching anticipation, the kind of anticipation that precedes something unforgettable. Ranger, the devoted German shepherd, had entered the room not just to comfort, but to perform the silent, unspoken duty only he could understand. And outside the sliding hospital doors, a subtle tremor ran through his body, the kind of shiver that spoke of an unbreakable bond and a promise that the coming moments would be witnessed, fully. The door clicked softly behind the nurse. Ranger's ears flicked, his eyes, dark and unyielding, locked onto Liam. And for the first time in the room that morning, the unspoken truth hovered palpably. This moment would change everyone present, perhaps forever. The hospital corridor seemed impossibly long that morning, lined with pale blue walls and flickering fluorescent lights that hummed softly overhead. Ranger walked beside the Parker family's stretchered urgency, paws silent against the polished linoleum. There was none of the usual excited barking, the tilt of his head at strangers, the instinctive curiosity of a German shepherd. Today, Ranger's movement was deliberate, almost reverential, a quiet procession toward a room he already understood, even without words. Amanda clutched Liam's blanket, fingers gripping it so tightly her knuckles whitened. Mark's eyes never left the dog. He could feel the electricity in Ranger's gaze, the way the animal seemed to sense the fragility of the seconds slipping through their hands. Even the nurses who passed in the hall slowed their steps, sensing that this was not an ordinary visit. When the sliding doors to Liam's room finally swung open, Ranger paused. He hovered at the threshold, head low, ears tilted forward. The room itself was sterile, infused with the faint chemical scent of antiseptic, the rhythmic beeping of monitors marking every shallow breath the baby took. Liam lay swaddled, his tiny face pale but peaceful, a thin wisp of hair brushing his forehead. His eyes fluttered, reacting to the familiar presence of his parents and to Ranger. The massive dog stepped in cautiously, paws barely making a sound. Every muscle in his body tensed, ready to adjust to any sudden movement, yet remarkably calm. He approached the crib slowly, as though time itself had slowed for him. Ranger's chest rose and fell in careful rhythm, mirroring Liam's shallow, fragile breaths, almost instinctively, as if he knew his presence might steady the infant in the final moments of life. Amanda whispered through her tears, "Ranger, it's okay. He's still here, he's with you." Ranger's amber eyes flicked toward her for a heartbeat, acknowledging the words before returning to Liam. He lowered his head slowly, the tips of his wet nose brushing the baby's cheek. Liam's eyelids fluttered once, then relaxed again, tiny fingers twitching toward the dog. Ranger pressed gently against the baby, his enormous head almost completely covering Liam's fragile form. The nurses leaned against the walls, their hands clasped tightly. They had seen pets and therapy animals comfort children before, but never anything like this. Ranger's presence was different. It wasn't just companionship. It was awareness, comprehension, loyalty, an almost human understanding of the depth of this moment. The baby monitor emitted an irregular beep, almost imperceptible, and Ranger flinched slightly at the sound. But he did not withdraw. Instead, he adjusted his position, nudging Liam with the tip of his nose, making sure the baby remained centered against his chest. The act was gentle but deliberate, almost ceremonial, as if Ranger were performing a sacred duty that he alone could carry out. Mark whispered, his voice trembling, "He knows it's the end." Ranger's ears twitched, and he shifted slightly, laying his massive head flat on Liam's chest. The baby's tiny hand found Ranger's fur, fingers brushing across the coarse hairs with a tentative curiosity. Ranger responded with a low, almost imperceptible growl, not threatening but protective. It was a sound that reverberated softly through the room, filling it with gravity and weight. Amanda's breath hitched. "It's okay, sweetie, he's here, he's safe." The doctor, standing silently in the corner, cleared his throat. I've never seen a dog respond like this before. It's remarkable and unsettling." But no one moved. No one spoke further. Ranger's presence had suspended time. The machine's faint beeping, the soft hum of the fluorescent lights, even the distant footsteps in the hallway, all of it became background noise to the quiet drama unfolding in that small hospital room. Then, with a deliberate, slow movement, Ranger nudged Liam's tiny hand toward his own chest. It was subtle, almost ceremonial, but the meaning was unmistakable. He wanted Liam to feel something, to remember warmth, protection, and love in the moments he had left. Amanda whispered, He's trying to comfort him." Ranger stayed still for a long, silent minute, pressing his head to the baby's chest. Every breath, every small twitch of muscles, seemed to communicate a connection beyond comprehension. Liam's shallow breaths became just slightly steadier, a tiny, miraculous rhythm forming in tandem with Ranger's own heartbeat. The father, Mark, whispered hoarsely, "He's giving him strength. I think he's giving him strength." The room's tension was almost unbearable. Every adult in the room felt it, the weight of life and death pressing on their shoulders. And yet, Ranger didn't flinch, didn't step back. He remained pressed to the baby, guarding him with a devotion that no words could capture. Then suddenly, Ranger lifted his head slightly, ears flicked back, and let out a soft, mournful whine. It was a sound that carried sorrow and love in equal measure, a sound that caused every adult in the room to freeze, their hearts catching in their throats. The whine was not loud, but it filled the room with presence. It was a cry that spoke without words, a warning and a benediction intertwined. Amanda's tears fell freely now, streaking her face. "Ranger, oh my God, he knows." Mark nodded, too choked with emotion to speak. Ranger's eyes flicked from him to Amanda, then back to Liam, and he lowered his head again, pressing it against the tiny chest. The baby's fingers twitched once more, as if reacting to a silent reassurance only the dog could convey. The doctor stepped closer, though carefully, maintaining the sacred space Ranger had created. Animals, they don't understand death this way. Ranger's deep, intelligent gaze locked onto the doctor, almost challenging the notion. He whined again, a low, trembling sound that seemed to acknowledge the truth. He did understand. He had always understood, and he would stay with Liam steadfast until the very end. A sudden beep from the monitor drew everyone's attention. Liam's tiny chest shivered in an uneven breath. Ranger responded instantly, shifting his massive frame to match the baby's rhythm, chest to chest, as though offering silent support. Each movement was precise, deliberate, almost ritualistic. There was no chaos in his actions, only purpose. Amanda whispered in awe, He's staying with him, he knows this is it." Ranger's eyes flicked toward the doorway, then back at Liam. It was as if he were telling the world that nothing else mattered. The machines, the doctors, the strangers, none of it was relevant here. Only Liam, only this fragile life in his paws, only the promise Ranger had silently made the day the baby had come home. For a long moment, no one in the room breathed. Then Ranger pressed closer, head against Liam's chest, fur soft against fragile skin, and let out a single, deep, heart-wrenching sigh. And just as the sigh faded, the nurse at the doorway whispered, trembling, he knows what's coming." The air in the room seemed to tighten, a heavy, almost tangible pressure pressing down on everyone present. Ranger's gaze never wavered. The dog's body remained tense but calm, each breath carefully matched to Liam. Every person in the room understood that the moments ahead would be unthinkably painful, and yet somehow sacred. Amanda held Liam's blanket tighter, Mark's hand rested against hers, and Ranger simply stayed, guarding, comforting, loving with a depth no human could match. The world outside that room ceased to exist. Only the baby, only the dog, only the fragile thread of life connecting them remained. And as Ranger's head rested fully against Liam's tiny chest, the faintest shift in his amber eyes hinted at the understanding that would soon grip everyone in the room. This was not just a visit. This was the beginning of something unforgettable. The hospital room had grown impossibly quiet. Outside, the corridor buzzed with routine footsteps, distant voices, the hum of fluorescent lights. But inside, time seemed to warp, compressed into the fragile moments that Ranger and Liam shared. Ranger remained pressed to the baby's chest, massive body taut yet gentle, eyes flicking from Liam's pale face to the parents and back. It was a silent vigil, an unspoken promise that nothing would touch Liam without Ranger's knowledge. Amanda Parker's hands shook as she brushed a stray lock of hair from Liam's forehead. "He's here, sweetie," she whispered. "He won't leave you." Her words trembled in the air, but Liam's tiny chest rose and fell with a subtle steadiness, a rhythm that seemed almost unnatural given the severity of his condition. The doctor, Dr. Reynolds, observed from the corner, clipboard forgotten, his jaw tight. He had been monitoring the machines for years, seen life cling and fade, but nothing prepared him for this scene. Ranger's amber eyes reflected a depth of awareness that defied explanation. Every twitch of his ears, every subtle movement of his paws seemed choreographed to match the baby's fragile life signs. When Liam shivered, Ranger's head shifted slightly, pressing closer, providing warmth, comfort, and something more intangible, a kind of grounding presence that no medicine could replicate. Mark leaned forward, voice breaking. I've never seen anything like this. He's giving him strength." Amanda nodded, tears streaming freely. "He knows, Mark, he knows everything." The nurse at the doorway, who had witnessed countless hospital miracles and tragedies, whispered to herself, "How does he know? How does he know? But no one answered. There was no need. Ranger's actions spoke louder than words ever could. Then, with a deliberate movement, Ranger nudged Liam's tiny hand toward his own chest. The baby's fingers brushed against the coarse fur, and for a fleeting moment, a tiny spark of life seemed to surge through him. The monitors, which had been irregular, emitted a slight rhythmic pulse that none of the medical staff could fully interpret. It was as though the connection between dog and child influenced more than just comfort. It influenced the very rhythm of life itself. The doctor cleared his throat softly, unable to look away. I can't explain it. I've seen therapy animals, but this is different. Ranger responded to no one. His focus never wavered. Every subtle twitch of muscle, every low, mournful whine, communicated an urgency that only the baby could feel. Liam's eyelids fluttered slightly, and the faintest hint of a smile curved his lips, fragile but unmistakable. Amanda leaned closer, whispering, "Do you see that, Mark? He's reacting to him because of him." The father swallowed hard. It's like he's giving him hope one last time. Suddenly, Ranger's ears flicked back sharply. The monitor beeped irregularly, a faint spike in Liam's heart rate that sent the room into momentary panic. Nurses rushed instinctively, but Dr. Reynolds raised a hand. "Stop! Let the dog do what he's doing." The room fell into tense silence once again. Ranger shifted slightly, nudging the baby with his nose, adjusting so that Liam's tiny chest pressed fully against his own. His breathing slowed, measured, synchronized with the faint rhythm of the infant's heartbeat. Every observer held their breath. Amanda's voice shook as she whispered, He's calming him." And in that moment, something impossible occurred. Liam's fingers twitched more deliberately, moving across Ranger's fur as though seeking the warmth and protection he had known since birth. The faint beeping of the monitor aligned more closely with Ranger's steady chest. The doctor, wide-eyed, whispered under his breath, This shouldn't be happening." Ranger shifted again, resting his massive head atop Liam's chest fully, pressing him gently but firmly. The dog's eyes closed briefly, and for a heartbeat, the room was suspended in awe. Then Ranger let out a low, quivering whine, soft at first, then deeper, almost mournful. It was a sound that seemed to carry centuries of understanding, grief, and devotion all at once. Amanda and Mark both flinched at the mournful sound, hearts clenching. Every person in the room felt the weight of that whine, the echo of something profound that defied explanation. The nurse whispered, He knows exactly what's happening." Ranger's eyes opened slowly, meeting the gaze of Liam's parents. There was intelligence, awareness, and an almost human sorrow reflected in them. He pressed his head back down against the baby, stabilizing the fragile pulse with the warmth and pressure of his body. Liam's tiny chest rose and fell in steadier, almost rhythmic breaths. Then suddenly, Ranger lifted his snout slightly and licked Liam's hand. It was a gesture so gentle, so deliberate, that it caused Amanda to gasp. Liam's tiny fingers twitched and clenched slightly, as if responding not to instinct, but to a profound emotional cue that only he could comprehend. Mark whispered, barely audible, "It's like he's teaching him how to go if he has to." The words hung in the air, heavy and almost unbearable. Everyone froze, understanding the gravity of what the father implied. Ranger's role was no longer just comfort. It had become guidance, a bridge between life and whatever lay beyond, a presence that gave Liam strength in his final moments. Time seemed to stretch and warp. The faint beeping of the monitors, the subtle hum of fluorescent lights, and even the distant footsteps outside became irrelevant. All that mattered was the connection between the baby and the dog, a bond older and deeper than words, older than human understanding. Then Ranger did something that made everyone in the room involuntarily inhale. He lifted his massive paw, resting it gently on Liam's tiny chest, directly over the heart monitor. The gesture was deliberate, tender, and protective all at once. It was a silent promise. I will stay. I will guard. I will be here. Amanda clutched the baby's blanket tighter, tears streaking her face. He's staying with him, Mark. He's not leaving him. The doctor whispered more to himself than anyone else. Animals, they don't do this. They can't. This is natural. But Ranger's body and eyes told a different story. He remained perfectly still, every breath measured, every movement intentional. Liam's fingers brushed across his paw, and the faintest movement of a smile seemed to cross the baby's lips. Then the monitor beeped erratically. The room froze. Every adult's heart skipped. Ranger's ears twitched, his body tensing instinctively. But he did not move away. Instead, he leaned closer, pressing the full weight of his head gently against the tiny chest. His whine deepened, quivering with emotion, reverberating through the room in low, mournful tones. Amanda whispered through her sobs, he knows what's happening. He's guiding him." And at that moment, an unexplainable calm settled over the room. Liam's fingers twitched again, brushing across Ranger's fur with a newfound steadiness. The heartbeat monitor, which had been erratic moments before, aligned just slightly with Ranger's measured breathing. A fragile equilibrium had been restored. The nurse at the doorway trembled. I've never seen anything like this. It's like he's communicating with him with his soul." Mark shook his head, unable to speak. The magnitude of the moment pressed down, crushing in its intensity. Every person in the room understood they were witnessing something extraordinary, something that could not be quantified or explained. And then, as Ranger lowered his head fully again, chest pressed against the baby's, the air in the room shifted. A sense of suspense, of impending finality, filled every corner. Everyone held their breath, waiting, knowing that the moments ahead would test their hearts in ways nothing else could. Ranger's gaze met Amanda's for one brief, piercing second, and in that look, every person in the room understood a truth too profound to put into words. The baby's final moments were coming, and Ranger would be there until the very end. The room felt suspended in time. The hospital lights cast a sterile glow, yet within that small space, warmth radiated from a source that no machine or human could measure. Ranger lay pressed against Liam, enormous head resting over the infant's fragile chest, fur brushing the tiny hand that instinctively clutched at him. The gentle, rhythmic rise and fall of the dog's breathing seemed to guide the baby's own, calming him, grounding him, shielding him from the storm of uncertainty beyond the hospital walls. Amanda Parker clutched the blanket tighter, tears streaming freely. Mark knelt beside her, his hand on hers, their fingers interlaced in a silent plea. He's staying with him," Amanda whispered, voice shaking. Ranger's body trembled slightly, a subtle shiver that spoke not of fear but of devotion. Every person in the room felt it. This was not simple loyalty. It was something deeper, almost sacred. Dr. Reynolds, standing near the monitor, leaned closer, unable to tear his gaze away. He had seen countless end-of-life moments in his career, but never like this. The scene unfolding before him defied logic, reason, and even medical understanding. The infant's vitals, fragile and erratic moments ago, had begun to align subtly with Ranger's steady rhythm. It was as if the dog's presence alone was offering a lifeline in the most literal sense. Ranger lifted his head slightly, nostrils brushing against Liam's cheek, letting out a low, mournful whine that vibrated through the room. Every adult froze. The sound was not loud, not overwhelming, but it carried a weight that touched something primal within them, the undeniable essence of love, loyalty, and protection. Mark's voice caught in his throat. He's mourning with him." Amanda shook her head, tears spilling freely. "No, he's not just mourning. He's giving him courage, he's giving him peace." Ranger shifted subtly, repositioning himself so that his massive body cradled the infant even more securely. His head remained firmly atop Liam's chest, and his paw gently draped over the baby's tiny arm, protective as if it could shield the fragile life from the inevitable. Liam's fingers twitched, brushing against the coarse fur, his tiny grip instinctively responding to the warmth and safety Ranger offered. The nurse at the doorway whispered, voice trembling, "I've seen therapy dogs, but never anything like this. He's doing more than comforting him. He's guiding him." Amanda leaned closer to the baby, brushing her lips softly over Liam's hair. "It's okay, baby. You're not alone. Ranger's right here. He won't leave you." Ranger's ears flicked toward her words, a subtle acknowledgement before returning his focus fully to Liam. His massive frame shivered with the effort of remaining still, of maintaining the delicate balance between comfort and protection. Every muscle, every subtle motion was intentional. Then unexpectedly, Liam exhaled more fully than he had in hours. His tiny chest lifted with a strength that surprised even the seasoned nurses. Ranger responded instantly, nudging the baby gently with his nose, repositioning him slightly against his own body. The synchronization of their breathing became more apparent, more deliberate, almost as if Ranger were guiding the fragile rhythm of life itself. Dr. Reynolds leaned closer, whispering to the nurse beside him, "I don't know how to explain this, but the baby's vital signs are responding directly to the dog. It's unreal." Ranger's eyes, deep and intelligent, flicked briefly toward the parents, then back to Liam. It was as if he was aware of the gravity of the moment, that every second now carried weight far beyond the walls of the hospital room. He pressed closer, head flat against the infant's chest, low whine rising again. The sound was almost musical, a mournful lullaby that seemed to envelop the space, soothing the baby, comforting the parents, and even unnerving the medical staff. Mark's hand trembled as he reached out almost instinctively toward Ranger, but Ranger remained still, massive eyes fixed on Liam. There was no fear, no hesitation, only unwavering devotion. Mark withdrew his hand slowly, realizing instinctively that this was not a moment for human intervention. This was Ranger's duty, and only he could fulfill it. Time stretched unbearably. Each breath, each tiny twitch, each low whine carried meaning. Ranger's massive paw shifted gently, brushing against Liam's chest as if guiding the fragile heartbeat, offering reassurance that transcended language. The baby's eyelids fluttered, and for the first time in hours, a faint, almost imperceptible smile curved his lips. Amanda whispered through tears, voice breaking, He's helping him, he's giving him peace." Ranger's body trembled slightly with the effort of holding Liam so gently yet firmly. The nurse at the doorway wiped a tear, whispering, "I've never seen such connection. It's like he's carrying the baby's soul with him." Then, with deliberate care, Ranger lifted his head slightly and let out a deeper, more resonant whine. The sound echoed in the small room, vibrating through the walls, pressing against every heart in the space. It was both a lament and a declaration, an unspoken vow that he would remain until the very end. Amanda held Liam's blanket tighter, sobs breaking free. "Ranger, oh God, he's not leaving him, Mark, he's not leaving him." The heart monitor flickered, beeping irregularly. Panic rose briefly, but Ranger did not flinch. Instead, he pressed closer, chest aligned perfectly with Liam, paw draped over the tiny body as though shielding it from the invisible weight of mortality. Every observer held their breath. Dr. Reynolds whispered softly, more to himself than anyone else, "I've seen death. I've seen Bobby struggle, but I've never seen this, not even close." Ranger's amber eyes flicked toward him, almost knowingly, before returning to the baby. There was no fear in those eyes, only understanding, purpose, and devotion. He pressed his head fully onto Liam's chest again, letting out a soft sigh, a mournful sound that seemed to both mourn and protect. Then, without warning, the infant's fingers twitched again, brushing Ranger's paw. A fragile, fleeting movement, but enough to make every adult in the room gasp. It was a signal, perhaps of life, perhaps of acknowledgement, that Ranger understood. Mark whispered, voice trembling, He's guiding him. I think he knows it's time." The room was deathly quiet. Everyone watched, holding their breath, as Ranger adjusted slightly, pressing his massive body closer, aligning every part of himself with the tiny form of Liam. The connection between dog and baby was almost palpable, a fragile lifeline tethered by instinct, love, and an inexplicable understanding of what was coming. Amanda clutched the baby's blanket against her chest, sobs choking her voice. "It's okay, sweetie, Ranger here. He's here with you." Ranger's low whine rose again, long and quivering, echoing the unspoken sorrow that filled the room. Then, almost imperceptibly, his chest rose and fell in perfect rhythm with Liam's fragile breaths. The faint beeping of the monitor aligned almost magically with Ranger's heartbeat. The nurse whispered, voice shaking, It's like he's sharing his heartbeat with him. He's giving him his life force." Amanda and Mark exchanged a glance, eyes wide, tears streaming. They knew, somewhere deep in their hearts, that Ranger's actions were beyond instinct, beyond love, beyond explanation. He was performing a duty only he could understand, a final act of protection and devotion that transcended anything they had ever witnessed. And then, as Ranger pressed his head fully onto Liam's chest, the room seemed to hold its breath. Every sound, every movement, every flicker of the fluorescent lights became secondary to the quiet intensity of the bond between the baby and his protector. And in that frozen, suspended moment, everyone in the room understood a chilling, undeniable truth. Ranger's devotion would not end until the baby's final breath, and perhaps beyond. The hospital room had grown unbearably quiet, save for the faint beeping of the monitors and Ranger's steady, deliberate breathing. Time itself seemed to stretch, each second a fragile thread, holding together a reality none of the adults could fully comprehend. Ranger's massive head remained pressed against Liam's chest, eyes half closed, ears pinned back, as if every muscle in his body were concentrated on one purpose: protecting, comforting, and guiding the tiny life beneath him. Amanda Parker's tears fell freely, streaming down her cheeks as she whispered, "It's okay, baby, you're safe. Ranger, here." Her voice broke, caught between hope and terror. Mark's hands trembled as he gripped hers, both of them aware that they were standing at the threshold of something no parent should ever face. The nurse at the doorway wiped her eyes discreetly, whispering to herself, he knows exactly what's happening." She had seen therapy dogs comfort children before, but never like this. Ranger wasn't merely providing comfort. He was guiding Liam, synchronizing his breath, and in a way no one could explain, lending his own strength to the fragile infant. Ranger shifted slightly, nudging Liam with the tip of his nose, a delicate gesture that seemed simultaneously tender and commanding. Liam's tiny fingers twitched, brushing against the dog's coarse fur. The monitor emitted an irregular beep, and everyone instinctively stiffened. But Ranger did not flinch. Instead, he pressed closer, aligning his body fully with the baby, as if transferring some unseen force, a silent assurance that Liam was not alone in this critical moment. Mark's voice trembled as he whispered, He's holding him together. I think he knows how to help him." Amanda nodded, her lips trembling. "He's giving him strength. That's what he's doing. He's giving him strength." The doctor, Dr. Reynolds, had stepped closer, monitor readings in hand, but he dared not touch the baby or Ranger. This is extraordinary," he whispered, awe and disbelief mingling in his voice. "I've seen death approach. I've seen Bobby struggle, but never like this. Never a connection like this." Ranger let out a soft, low whine, vibrating through the room like a mournful lullaby. It was both heartbreaking and beautiful, a sound that seemed to carry centuries of understanding, loyalty, and love. Every person present felt their chest tighten, the sorrow and devotion nearly tangible. Amanda bent closer, brushing her lips over Liam's tiny forehead. "Ranger, you're amazing. Thank you. Thank you for being here." Ranger responded not to words but to the rhythm of life. His chest rose and fell in time with Liam's, slight but deliberate, each inhalation steadying the fragile heartbeat beneath him. For a fleeting moment, the erratic beeping of the monitor evened slightly, aligning with Ranger's rhythm. It was almost imperceptible, yet powerful enough to cause every observer to hold their breath. Then Ranger did something unexpected. He lifted his massive paw, placing it gently over Liam's tiny chest, directly on the heart monitor pad. The gesture was subtle, tender, and deeply purposeful. It was as though he was claiming his role as protector, asserting control over the fragile thread of life he had been entrusted to guard. Amanda's sobs intensified. "Oh my God, he's protecting him. He's staying with him until the very end." Mark reached toward the dog instinctively, but Ranger's eyes flicked toward him with an almost human warning. "This is my duty." Mark froze, realizing instinctively that no human touch could substitute for what Ranger was doing. This was not just love. This was sacred responsibility. A sudden, sharp beep from the monitor startled the adults. Liam's chest shuddered weakly, a stark reminder of the fragility of life in that moment. Ranger reacted instantly, nudging the baby with his nose, adjusting his body so Liam's chest was fully pressed against him. Every breath, every subtle movement was intentional, calculated to soothe, stabilize, and protect. The nurse whispered, "He's not just comforting him, he's trying to save him." Amanda clutched the blanket tighter, sobbing, "Oh God, he's not leaving him. He's not leaving him alone." Ranger's low whine deepened, resonating through the room like a vibration of grief and defiance. It was almost as if he were challenging the very reality that threatened Liam's life. The sound was mournful but resolute, a declaration that he would not abandon the child. Mark whispered, voice breaking, He knows Liam is leaving, and he's making sure he doesn't go alone." The monitor beeped again, erratic this time. Every person in the room flinched. Dr. Reynolds took a step forward, checking Liam's tiny body, but Ranger did not move an inch. The dog remained pressed to the baby, paw draped protectively, head resting on Liam's chest, every fiber of his being focused on the fragile life beneath him. Then it happened. Liam's tiny fingers twitched again, more deliberately this time, brushing against Ranger's paw. The faintest hint of a movement, but enough to ignite a wave of hope and heartbreak simultaneously. The baby's monitor, once irregular and chaotic, aligned slightly with Ranger's rhythm, just enough to suggest that the dog's presence was stabilizing the infant in a way no medicine could replicate. Amanda whispered through tears, "He's giving him peace. He's helping him. He's guiding him." Ranger's ears flicked slightly, acknowledging the words, before returning his focus entirely to the baby. His massive body trembled subtly, not from fear, but from the exertion of staying perfectly still, of offering comfort, protection, and guidance in one impossibly delicate act. Time seemed to slow. The air in the room thickened with anticipation, sorrow, and reverence. The outside world, machines, nurses, and hallways, faded into irrelevance. All that existed was Liam, Ranger, and the unbreakable bond forming between them. And then Ranger lifted his snout slightly and let out a long, quivering whine, one that seemed to stretch beyond the room, carrying grief and love and devotion in equal measure. Every person in the room felt their hearts tighten, their breath catch, as the dog's mournful cry resonated in the walls, in the air, in the very fabric of the moment. Amanda leaned closer, whispering, voice trembling, He's not letting him go. He won't let him go alone." Ranger's amber eyes flicked toward the parents, full of intelligence, understanding, and a depth of emotion no human could replicate. Then he returned his gaze to Liam, pressing his head fully to the tiny chest, letting out a soft, final sigh that carried both sorrow and steadfast devotion. The monitor beeped once, then again, irregularly. Liam's chest shivered, a subtle, fragile movement that made every heart in the room constrict. Ranger responded immediately, shifting slightly to keep perfect alignment with the infant's breaths, paw and head perfectly positioned. And in that unbearable, heart-stopping moment, the room fell utterly silent. Every person held their breath, watching, waiting, knowing that the fragile thread of life could break at any second. Then Ranger let out a long, low, mournful howl, and the world seemed to stop. Every heartbeat in the room, every breath, every thought froze in suspended horror and awe. The moment had arrived, and no one, human or animal, would ever forget what happened next. The room seemed suspended between seconds and eternity. Ranger's massive body remained draped over Liam, his head resting lightly on the infant's chest, paw guarding the tiny heart with unwavering precision. Every breath the baby took was mirrored by the dog, soft, deliberate, protective. Time slowed to a fragile crawl, each second stretched by the weight of anticipation and heartbreak. The sterile hospital lights could not pierce the warmth that radiated from the bond between the German shepherd and the baby. Amanda Parker pressed her face close to Liam's tiny form, tears streaking her cheeks. "It's okay, sweetie, you're not alone. Ranger here," she whispered, her voice trembling but resolute. Mark's hands gripped hers, knuckles white, each inhale shaky as he tried to hold onto the moment without shattering. The monitors beeped in irregular rhythms, reflecting the fragile life that clung to existence. Dr. Reynolds, standing silently near the doorway, could only watch. Years of medical experience offered no answers for what he witnessed. The uncanny precision of Ranger's movements, the way the dog seemed to regulate, comfort, and stabilize a life so delicate it could vanish in an instant. Ranger tilted his head slightly, pressing closer, letting the warmth of his massive body flow into Liam. His eyes, dark and intelligent, never left the baby. Every movement was intentional, a nudge here, a gentle paw adjustment there, a low, mournful whine that resonated through the room like an unspoken lullaby. It was a rhythm, a sacred ceremony, a final act of devotion. Amanda whispered through her tears, voice breaking, "He's giving him strength, he's not leaving him. Not now, not ever." Mark nodded, unable to speak, his throat too tight for words. Ranger shifted slightly, fur brushing Liam's tiny hands, head pressing down softly but firmly on the chest that had grown so fragile. The dog's paw draped protectively over the infant, as though creating an invisible shield against the inevitable. Then suddenly the monitor beeped erratically. Liam's tiny chest shuddered and a piercing hush fell over the room. Every heart skipped. Ranger responded immediately, pressing closer, adjusting his massive frame to cradle the baby more securely. His low, trembling whine filled the room, vibrating with sorrow, resolve, and an unspoken promise. "I will stay. I will guard. I will not leave you." Amanda's sobs grew louder. He's helping him. He's guiding him, oh God." The nurse at the doorway whispered, voice shaking, "I've never seen a dog do something like this. It's miraculous and heartbreaking." Ranger's eyes flicked toward the parents, amber depths shining with intelligence and purpose, before returning to Liam. Every instinct, every ounce of strength he possessed, was devoted entirely to the fragile life beneath him. His low whines became almost musical, a rhythm of sorrow and devotion that seemed to envelop the room. The infant's tiny fingers twitched again, brushing lightly against Ranger's fur. The monitor beeped in chaotic, uneven rhythms, each sound slicing through the room like a reminder of the precious fragility of life. Ranger nudged the baby gently, pressing closer, realigning his massive body so that the smallest movements could be absorbed, calmed, and steadied by his protective presence. Amanda whispered, choking back sobs, He's not letting him go. He's not letting him leave alone." Mark reached instinctively toward Ranger, but the dog's eyes met his, warning silently, "This is my duty, my responsibility. Do not interfere." Mark froze, understanding that no human hand could replicate the love, understanding, or devotion Ranger was offering. Minutes stretched. The room seemed impossibly still except for Ranger's steady, protective presence and Liam's faint, fluttering breaths. Every observer felt the tension, the fragile line between life and death, the immense courage of a dog doing what no human could. Then Ranger's whine rose, deeper, longer, more mournful than before. It was a sound that carried sorrow, love, and unyielding devotion, almost like a chant meant to fortify the baby's spirit. Liam's chest rose slightly, a faint but noticeable sign that the dog's presence was stabilizing the fragile life beneath him. Amanda's lips trembled as she whispered, "He's giving him peace. He's giving him courage. Oh God, he's giving him everything he can." The monitors beeped one last erratic sequence. Liam's chest shuddered, the tiniest gasp escaping his lips. Ranger responded immediately, pressing closer, every fiber of his body alert, massive paw over the tiny chest as if holding it together with sheer willpower. Dr. Reynolds' whispered voice choked. This is impossible. He shouldn't be able to do this, yet he is." Ranger lifted his head slightly, gazing down at Liam with eyes that seemed to hold centuries of understanding. Then he rested his head again, pressing fully against the infant's chest, allowing his own warmth, weight, and presence to become a lifeline. Liam's fingers twitched one last time, brushing against Ranger's paw. It was fleeting, delicate, but unmistakably real. Amanda's sobs broke free. Ranger, he's staying with him until the very end. Mark's hand trembled as he rested it on the blanket. He dared not touch the dog, not wanting to disturb the delicate balance of life and devotion Ranger had created. He's giving him everything he can. He's his guardian. Then the faintest, almost imperceptible sigh escaped Liam's lips. The monitors beeped with a fragile rhythm that seemed almost synchronized with Ranger's breathing. The room held its collective breath, suspended in awe, grief, and anticipation. Ranger lifted his head slightly again, amber eyes flicking between the baby and the parents, and then lowered it fully, resting every ounce of his massive body over the fragile infant. The mournful whine returned, vibrating through the room, carrying an unspoken promise. "You are not alone. I will not leave you." And then, for a single, suspended heartbeat, the world seemed to hold its breath. Liam's chest rose and fell one last time, so faintly that it was nearly imperceptible, yet enough to make every adult in the room feel the magnitude of what was happening. Ranger pressed his head fully down, warmth, weight, and devotion enveloping the baby. The low whine became a soft, quivering hum. The monitors, still erratic, beeped once, twice, and then slowed, as if the room itself recognized the sacredness of the moment. Amanda whispered, trembling, it's okay, sweetie, Ranger here, he won't leave you." The nurse at the doorway, tears streaming, could barely speak. He's doing what no human could, he's guiding him to the end." And then it happened. Liam's tiny chest gave one final, quivering rise and fall. Ranger pressed closer, responding instantly, as if to soften the inevitable, to cushion the fragile transition between life and whatever lay beyond. The room was frozen in time, every heart suspended in a mixture of grief, awe, and wonder. And in that moment, the impossible became real. Ranger's devotion carried Liam through his final breath, a silent guardian holding him with love that no words could capture, no human could replicate, and no world would ever forget. The room was silent, save for the soft, irregular beeping of monitors that had once measured life but now marked absence. Liam's tiny chest lay still beneath Ranger's massive head, the baby's final breath already faded into the air. Ranger remained motionless, body pressed over the child as if holding the fragile soul close to his own. His amber eyes, wide and glistening, stared blankly ahead, mourning in a way so profound that it filled the room with a weight heavier than any human grief. Amanda Parker collapsed onto the edge of the hospital bed, clutching Liam's blanket to her chest, body trembling with unbearable sobs. "Oh my God, my baby, she whispered, voice hoarse and fractured. Her tears fell like rain, streaking down her cheeks, soaking the blanket that had held her child and now bore the imprint of Ranger's protective body. Mark knelt beside her, hands gripping hers, knuckles white, but his own tears betrayed the strength he tried to maintain. Ranger, he stayed with him. He didn't leave him, he murmured, voice thick with shock and awe. He guided him. The nurse at the doorway whispered almost reverently, I've never seen anything like this. That dog, he knew." Ranger lifted his massive head slightly, eyes flicking toward the parents. His body trembled with a low, almost imperceptible whine, a sound that carried both grief and relief. Relief that Liam was finally free of pain, grief for the loss he had witnessed, and sorrow for the weight of what he had endured alongside the baby. Every fiber of Ranger's being seemed to vibrate with emotion, a silent testament to the bond he had shared with Liam in those final, sacred moments. Amanda stroked Ranger's fur through her tears, whispering, thank you for staying with him, for loving him, for everything." Ranger responded with a slow, almost imperceptible lick to her hand, acknowledging her gratitude yet remaining focused on the child he had protected. Dr. Reynolds, standing near the monitors, cleared his throat softly. "It's extraordinary," he murmured. "I've worked in pediatric care for decades. I've seen therapy dogs comfort children, but this was something else entirely. That dog, he understood, he knew, and he stayed." Mark nodded, his eyes fixed on Ranger. He was his guardian, his protector, until the very end. The room held a heavy, sacred silence as Ranger finally lifted his head fully, moving slightly away from Liam but never leaving the baby's side. His amber eyes scanned the room, slow, deliberate, filled with awareness. He remained vigilant, as though ensuring the fragile life he had cradled in his massive body remained at peace even in death. Amanda sobbed softly, resting her forehead against Liam's still body. "Oh, my sweet baby, Ranger stayed with you. He didn't leave you alone." Her words were a mix of grief and awe, heartbreak and gratitude, spoken through the unbearable weight of loss. Outside the hospital, the world moved on unaware, but inside, every heartbeat in the room was synchronized with Ranger's mourning. Each breath he drew seemed measured, deliberate, filled with sorrow and reverence. He nudged Liam gently one last time with his nose, as if reassuring the parents that the child was at peace, that the transition was gentle and filled with love. Then Ranger lay back beside Liam, resting his massive head on the blanket, eyes half closed but still alert. The mournful whines became softer, almost a low hum of grief, echoing the emptiness left behind by the baby's passing. Every adult in the room felt their chest tighten. It was as if the sorrow was not only theirs but Ranger's, shared in an unspoken communion of pain, love, and devotion. Amanda whispered through her tears, "He loved him, he really loved him, and he stayed when no one else could." Mark's voice trembled as he added, "And maybe he gave him courage. Maybe he helped him go peacefully. Maybe Ranger was the miracle we needed to hold him until the end." The nurse wiped her eyes, voice shaking. I've never seen anything like this. That dog, he wasn't just comforting the baby. He was guiding him. He was everything a parent could hope for when they can't be enough." Ranger lifted his head slightly, eyes flicking toward the monitor, then back at Liam. His massive paw shifted, draping lightly over the baby's blanket as if continuing to shield him, to guard the fragile life even after the soul had departed. Every breath he took seemed heavy with purpose, heavy with love, heavy with sorrow. Amanda bent closer, whispering, "He's not just a dog, he's a guardian, a protector, a hero. He stayed when no one else could." Mark nodded, tears streaming. The world has to know this. Everyone should see what he did, how he loved him, how he stayed with him until the very end. Outside the room, the hospital continued its routine. Footsteps, distant voices, the hum of machinery. But within that small space, the moment was sacred, eternal. Ranger remained beside Liam, silent, devoted, a massive guardian holding space for love, grief, and reverence in a way no human could. The parents sat in stunned awe, unable to move, unable to speak. Ranger's presence anchored them, the living proof that love could transcend fear, mortality, and despair. Every tear, every sob, every heartbeat was shared with the dog who had carried the weight of a child's final moments with unwavering devotion. Then quietly, Ranger shifted, pressing his head fully to the blanket covering Liam's chest. A low, soft whine escaped him, more mournful, more intimate than ever before. It resonated through the room, vibrating with grief, love, and an almost human sense of sorrow. Every adult in the room felt the sound pierce their hearts, the echo of the bond between the dog and the baby transcending the limits of human comprehension. Amanda whispered, trembling, "He stayed with him all the way, he stayed with him until the end." Mark's voice was barely audible. The world has to know what he did. Everyone has to know. Ranger, he saved him in a way no one else could. Ranger lifted his head slightly, amber eyes meeting the parents' gaze, heavy with understanding, sorrow, and unyielding loyalty. Then he rested his head back onto the blanket, remaining steadfast, never leaving the side of the child he had cradled, protected, and loved with every ounce of his being. And in that moment, the quiet room held an unspoken truth. Ranger's love had bridged the gap between life and death, carrying the baby's final moments with grace, devotion, and a loyalty so profound that it would leave every witness forever changed. The adults remained frozen, hearts aching, breaths caught in their throats, as the realization settled over them. The dog had not just comforted the baby, he had been the vessel of his final courage, the silent guardian that allowed a fragile life to pass with dignity, love, and warmth. And as Ranger rested there, still and unwavering, everyone in the room understood something no one could forget. The world would never see loyalty, love, or devotion like this again, and perhaps it never should be forgotten. The hospital room was hushed, every sound seemingly absorbed into the stillness that had fallen after Liam's passing. Ranger remained beside the baby, his massive body curled protectively, head resting on the blanket as if guarding the child even in death. The mournful hum of his whine had softened, now more of a low, lingering sigh that spoke volumes. It was grief, yes, but also a quiet acknowledgement that the baby had been held, loved, and never alone. Amanda Parker rested her face against her hands, tears soaking her cheeks. The grief was suffocating, raw, and unrelenting, yet beneath the anguish a sense of awe persisted. He stayed with him. Every moment, every heartbeat, she whispered. Her voice cracked, breaking under the weight of loss and gratitude. Mark held her hand tightly, the tremor in his own body betraying the depth of his sorrow. Ranger, he didn't leave him, not for a second. He carried him through it. The father's voice was choked with emotion. "I've never seen anything like it. I don't think I ever will." Dr. Reynolds stepped closer, his expression a mixture of reverence and disbelief. "I've been in this hospital for decades," he said quietly, "and I've never witnessed anything like this. That dog, he did what no human could. He stayed, guided, comforted, and in some inexplicable way, he carried the baby's final moments with him." Ranger's amber eyes flicked to the parents, filled with intelligence and sorrow, then back to Liam. The dog shifted slightly, paw brushing lightly against the tiny blanket-covered form, a subtle gesture of continued protection. It was as though he were saying, "I was here. I kept him safe. He was not alone." Amanda whispered through her tears, voice trembling, "He's more than a dog. He's a guardian, a miracle, a part of Liam's soul." Mark nodded, swallowing hard, unable to speak as Ranger's presence anchored them in the fragile aftermath. For hours no one moved. Nurses and staff passed quietly outside, respecting the sacred stillness. Ranger never left Liam's side, his eyes occasionally flicking toward the parents, as if seeking acknowledgement for the duty he had fulfilled. Every person in the room understood. They were witnessing something extraordinary, a bond between life and love that defied explanation, transcended reason, and would never be forgotten. Eventually, Amanda and Mark had to rise, to face the world outside the hospital walls, carrying grief heavier than any words could describe. Ranger followed, massive paws padding silently behind them, still vigilant. Outside, the cold air of the parking lot cut through their tears, but the dog remained steady, a living anchor in the storm of sorrow. The Parker family returned home with Ranger, the house strangely quiet without Liam's presence. Every room echoed with absence, yet the dog's quiet vigilance provided a small, grounding comfort. He would lie near the crib, now empty, resting his head where Liam's tiny body had once been. Every subtle movement, every gentle sigh, was a reminder of the bond they had shared, a living monument to love and loyalty. Neighbors and friends began to hear the story. The German shepherd who had cradled a dying baby, who had stayed with him until his very last breath. Social media posts spread like wildfire, photos of Ranger curled protectively over Liam, the parents' tear-streaked faces, the monitors capturing the fragile moments that had been witnessed. The story resonated far beyond the local community. It became a symbol of devotion, loyalty, and the inexplicable ways animals touch human lives. Amanda spoke to reporters once, voice still shaking. Ranger didn't just comfort Liam, he loved him in a way I'll never forget. He stayed with him when no one else could. He was his protector, his guardian, his friend. Mark added quietly, he taught us what love really is, and maybe somehow he carried Liam into the next world with him. Ranger's presence became central to the healing process. He seemed to understand the depth of loss, offering quiet companionship, resting his head gently on Amanda or Mark when grief overwhelmed them, lying silently near Liam's empty crib, as if guarding the memories they had created. Slowly, the Parker family began to navigate life without their son, each step marked by sorrow, gratitude, and the living proof of a dog's devotion. Months passed, but the story of Ranger and Liam continued to touch hearts across the world. People shared it endlessly, moved by the pure, unexplainable bond between a child and a dog. Letters arrived, emails, calls, parents who had lost children, people who had loved animals, strangers moved to tears. The story was no longer just about grief. It was about love, loyalty, and the extraordinary ways life reveals itself even in loss. Amanda and Mark established a small foundation in Liam's memory, dedicated to therapy animals and the bond between humans and dogs. Ranger became the living symbol of that mission, his calm presence offering solace to families who had endured loss, his story inspiring awe, hope, and gratitude. One evening, Amanda found Ranger lying near Liam's favorite blanket, resting his massive head on it gently. She knelt beside him, brushing a hand over his fur. "You saved him," she whispered. "You stayed with him until the end. You gave him peace and you gave us strength." Ranger's amber eyes met hers, calm, intelligent, full of an understanding that needed no words. Then he nudged the blanket with his nose, as if to reassure her that he remembered every moment, and that love endured beyond life itself. Mark joined her, hand resting on Ranger's back. "He's a miracle," he said softly, "and we'll never forget him or what he did for our son." The world remembered too. News outlets revisited the story, documentaries were made, and millions of people learned of the German shepherd who had cradled a baby in his final moments. Messages flooded in from strangers moved by the tale, some offering condolences, others simply sharing gratitude for the reminder that love, true, selfless, unwavering love, can manifest in forms beyond human comprehension. Ranger remained by the Parker family's side until the end of his own days, always vigilant, always gentle, a living testament to devotion. The house was never empty, not really. Even without Liam, the bond between the child and his guardian continued to shape the hearts of those left behind. Amanda often whispered to Ranger as he rested near her chair, "You were his hero, you were his angel." And Ranger, ever loyal, would nuzzle her hand, eyes shining with quiet understanding, as if to say, "I was there. I stayed. I did what I could." The world cried when they learned the story, but it also smiled. It remembered a bond so extraordinary, so beyond words, that it transcended grief itself. Ranger's final action, the unwavering devotion that saw him through the hardest moments of life and death, became a symbol of hope, a reminder that love never truly ends, and that sometimes heroes have 4 legs, fur, and hearts bigger than we can comprehend. And in the quiet moments late at night, the Parker family would remember Liam and Ranger beside him, massive, gentle, unwavering. And they would cry again, yes, but also smile, knowing that in those final moments their son was never alone. Ranger had done what no one else could. He had carried a life with love, he had cradled a soul in his paws, and he had shown the world the true meaning of devotion. And in doing so, he left a legacy that would echo far beyond the walls of any hospital, into every heart that heard the story, into every tear that fell, into the enduring reminder that love, pure and unyielding, can save even the smallest life in the darkest moment.